100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. His most famous work, first published in 1967. I actually read this with Amanda J. I'll put her link down below. Thanks, Amanda. Marquez, of course, is one of the founding fathers of Latin magical realism, and this particular novel kind of stands at the forefront as one of the genre's biggest influences. And the definition of magical realism is something that has become pretty muddled over the years. But in regards to this, it is a narrative style that infuses magical elements into a very realistic or familiar world. For me, it's kind of more a matter of tone in which, that is told. For example, in this, you'll have a scene where a woman goes to hang a sheet on a clothing line, and a gust of wind will come and it lifts her up to heaven. And this kind of fantastical scene is told in the same tone than if she was just, tying her shoes. So it's more a matter of a tone, and, as Marquez himself said, he tells it flat. Unfortunately, today, magical realism has become this kind of go-to term for, any watered-down, fairy tale-esque, quirky, whimsical, fable bullshit that, is put down the pipeline, and it's slapped with the magical realism tag. So it was interesting going into this to seeing if I could get along with the magical realism elements, and if so, why, compared to all the garbage that is published today. Plot-wise, I should probably mention, 100 Years of Solitude is an epic family saga. It follows 7 generations of the Buendia family, the head of which is named Jose Arcadio Buendia. He is the founder of a fictional city named Macondo. We follow over 100 years of this family, through all their exploits involving love and violence and madness and incest and death. We follow all that, as well as the town that they inhabit, the town of Moconda, that goes from kind of being this very simplistic paradise to, becoming colonized, to being industrialized, and inevitably, pretty much destroyed by war and greed and everything else humanity offers. And then, of course, to go along with this history of this family, we have all the layers of magical realism. It's never ending. We have characters who go through stages of not aging. There is, a whole town that comes down with insomnia. There's prophecies, and there's ghosts, and there's, babies being born with pigtails, and there's cities made out of glass, and on and on and on and on. And it all totally works. And the reason why the magical realism in 100 Days of Solitude works is because of its roots. And, through the roots of Marquez and Latin and Colombian culture, and we're talking about its religion and its spirituality and its philosophy, its traditions in family and in storytelling, all these elements come together and are able to kind of tether down those whimsical happenings. So it gives the story weight. And, it makes it more so the magical realism is more kind of a layer of flavoring rather than being the focus of the piece, right? And that is what's really missing from the vast majority of all the junk that is published today under, the genre of magical realism, where you have just all these very quirky fairy tale magical elements in literary fiction, and that itself is the meat of the story. So, it comes across as, fluff. It's something that's very forgettable because it doesn't hold the weight. Yeah, I really did enjoy 100 Years of Solitude. I totally think it holds its place as one of the, classics of Latin literature. It absolutely does carry this magic with it that has, very little to do with the, all the fantastical elements that are surrounding these characters. But it has more to do with Marquez and his detail and his ability to really immerse the reader in this world. I do think it's special, and I won't say it's perfect. I think, one of the biggest problems with the book is that it's very dense with information, and there's very little room within the book for dialogue. So that, combined with the whimsical elements, can prohibit the reader from really connecting to any given character. So there was never anyone in this, any member of the family that, I was necessarily caring, where they came from or where they were going. But it was more, the family itself, the Buendias as an entity. And, of course, as the story goes along, there's more and more generations added onto this family. and it becomes more and more detailed, and it becomes this giant balancing act for Marquez to, balance all these stories and all these characters. And I think the way he does it is just so elegant and super admirable, and I really liked it. Yeah, it was a great reading experience. Not a very detailed review, I know, but I do suggest, if you're someone who calls themselves a fan of magical realism, especially if you haven't dug deep to the roots of the genre, whether it be within Latin or German literature, whatever, I suggest you do so, because I think you'll feel a much different tone from a book like 100 Years of Solitude, compared to all the fairy tale fluff that is, passed off as magical realism today. And, I'm not even like a writer of fiction, but I'm confident that, I could crap out a modern magical realism book. Like, all you need is like a super annoying title. So we'll call it like, The Girl Who Had Ears for Eyes. And, the cover, which is the most important part, let's be real for these people, it's got to be kind of dark and spooky. And, we'll have like a woman on the cover with a human body and then like a fox for a head, because these idiots, they love that stuff. And the book itself, the story won't matter. It'll just be like, a fairy tale retelling or fluff. And it'll be around like 180 pages, because even people who say they like modern day magical realism, they don't want to read more than 200 pages of that shit. Let's be real. So if you'd like to invest in that and write me a blank check, please contact me down below. But until then, pick up 100 Years of Solitude.